Well, hello, Manchester, Auburn, Hooksett. As it is every Wednesday, it is the Progress Report, and we're back live. We hope you'll join us, 640-3091, if you want to participate. I have to tell you, folks, that right off the bat, that my dear friend and usual co-host sitting right here is unavailable tonight. He's had some serious losses, I'm sorry to say, at this time of year, particularly hurtful. He himself is all right, and I'm sure he'll bounce back, but he's taking care of people after, some relatives, close relatives of his wife have run into, there's been a serious loss. And Mike, if you watch this show and one of its repeats, I love you, man, and you're going to be taking care of people as you do so often. But nonetheless, we are on with the progress report for this Wednesday, December 13th, and I'm so pleased that I have been able to have join us tonight a very fine contributor to New Hampshire and the nation in many ways, Paul Hodes. Longtime lawyer. You had a firm here in Manchester, right?
I did for a long time. I had a firm here.
I think it's still going to sign up on Elm Street called Hades and Hodes.
That's right. Well, the sign is still up, but my old partner, Jamie Hage, hitched his wagon up with Jay Hodis, who then retired, but kept the same building, and Jay was the only other person with that name in New Hampshire, so it was convenient because kept the sign relatively similar.
No kidding.
No kidding.
Any relation or just a coincidence?
No, just,
I'll be damned.
That's right.
Well, what do you know?
In fact, Jay was one of the first calls I ever made more than 35 years ago when I came to New Hampshire. I said, we have the same name. It looks like you're a lawyer. Do I know you? Are we related? He said, no, we're not related, but we have the same name. So
I'll be damned.
We always had a good time with that.
I never knew about that. Well, there they are, still up on North Elm Street. I'm sure they'll provide excellent service if you need the services of good lawyers in this city. But I'm very pleased to have Paul here because in all the years we've been doing this show, which is now at least 8, we've never had Paul on the Progress Report. Back when he was a candidate for U.S. Senator, we had his lovely and talented wife, Pego, on the show.
Truly the better half.
Better half, indeed.
Much better.
We all agree you married up, Paul.
Absolutely.
And we've never had Paul on, and he's been a strong contributor to the life of our state and our nation, ever since he began practicing law here and has done so much more. And Paul reminded me, because he put a Facebook post up, which I wouldn't have even noticed, that last night was the first night of Hanukkah.
That's right. First candle.
First candle. And it goes for how many days?
It's 12 days.
12 days. Does that have anything to do with the 12 days of Christmas or not?
Maybe it's 12 days.
Yeah.
I'm thinking it's 12 days. I will probably get calls from people saying, what kind of a Jewish person are you that you don't remember? So anyway, it's a number of days.
I've always loved that we do so much about Hanukkah, because my understanding, Paul, in the Jewish liturgical calendar, which is very rich, Hanukkah is a pretty minor deal, except that you're here in this country which is overwhelmingly, at least nominally Christian, and we have all of this, so we make a bigger deal out of Hanukkah than it really is for observant Jews.
I have to tell you, in my household, we celebrate all holidays. I think all holidays.
That's a great idea.
All holidays ought to be celebrated. We have a Hanukkah bush, which is our Christmas tree, and our Kwanzaa plant. So I mean, we add plus a pagan solstice. We don't like to let any holiday go uncelebrated, and I was the first Jewish congressman from New Hampshire.
Really?
But I really been mostly secular, and you may know more about the Jewish liturgical calendar than I do.
I doubt it.
But
maybe. I like that stuff.
But we celebrate Hanukkah. Pego's uncle, not Jewish at all, gave us a great, beautiful menorah. And we like candles, and this year it leads up to it's leading up to Christmas. So Pego is the queen of Christmas, and she does it to the nines. So the house is really nicely decorated.
Paul, I have not been a whole lot of places recently. I've traveled a lot in my life. But, some time ago, I had a wonderful trip over to Hong Kong and China because my son, who grew up here in Manchester, Central Grad and Dartmouth and all that, he ended up marrying a girl from Hong Kong, and we went to have a spectacular wedding ceremony in Hong Kong. Oh my gosh.
My, oh my.
And it included a trip to Beijing. And it was at this time of year, and Christmas was everywhere.
Wow.
I mean, it was in Hong Kong.
Wow.
It was in Beijing. The
I'm
Christmas
impressed.
decorations were everywhere.
I'm impressed. Well, look, it's an opportunity to celebrate with family and friends. It's an opportunity to look forward to the return of the light and the new year.
That's really what it's about.
I think believe me, we all can use it.
Yeah, we certainly can. And it's just a magical time. And it all goes back, as you say, to the solstice and the shortest days of the year right about now. But, eventually it takes a long time. They become longer and the sun does return. And
the sun does come back.
We've celebrated that from, pagan times, long time ago. So I wanted to turn to a few things. You've had a distinguished political career here in New Hampshire, 2 terms as a U.S. Congressman. Then you had the misfortune to try and become a U.S. Senator in 2010, which was a disaster for everybody. We lost everything in 2010. It was the year O'Brien became the Speaker of the House, and the Democrats in the House were, down to 100 and something.
We lost 100 seats.
Lost 100 seats, and
we being Democrats.
We being the Democrats, exactly right. And that's when you came a cropper in that, and it was it wasn't you, it was the times, and the times were just really hostile.
I learned you can't surf a tsunami, and we had 2010 was a tsunami year, not just a wave, but a tsunami. And I think what happened was, if you think about it, I got to Congress in 2006. George Bush was still president. The Iraq War was raging. I was elected on really anti-war sentiment.
Right.
I was fortunate enough to be in a position to help elect President Obama. I served as a national co-chair for Obama for president in 2008. And then in 2010, after the Recovery Act and a significant investment had to be made there to save the states from bankruptcy, and health care, an investment in the Affordable Care Act. I think people really didn't understand what benefits the Affordable Care Act would bring, and there was a huge tide against, in the midterm, against the Affordable Care Act, and I think that really had a lot to do with the Democratic losses.
And isn't it interesting? We had that in 2010, and I think you're absolutely right. I think the Affordable Care Act was a huge negative on the Democratic candidates with people like you and many, many others. And today, it's looking pretty good. We have the Republicans with the control of the White House, both houses of Congress, and they can't seem to kill this thing because I think people think it's beneficial.
Well, look, they're trying to strangle it in every way they can. They tried an outright appeal. There are provisions now in this new proposed tax bill which undercut the ACA by taking away the requirement that people either have buy health insurance or pay because they don't have it. They're trying to get rid of that.
Yeah.
President Trump decided to shorten the sign-up time for the Affordable Care Act.
Cut down the advertising to support people to sign up.
Cut the advertising out. They've tried everything to strangle it. And look, the Affordable Care Act is far from perfect, and we knew that.
We knew that.
We knew that when we voted for it. I was a strong proponent of having what's called the public option in the Affordable Care Act because I thought it was going to be critically important to have competition for the private insurance companies. Because as an attorney, I dealt with private insurance companies a lot in my time, and
I did too.
And I can't say that. Insurance is a necessary evil, and that second word there is something that I had in mind when it came time for the Affordable Care Act, because it struck me that the for-profit insurance companies who treat people as profit centers instead of patients were a real problem. So the Affordable Care Act didn't do everything we could have wanted, and I wasn't happy that there wasn't a public option as competition for the
Right.
insurance companies, but I thought we needed to get started. And some of the provisions were originated right here in New Hampshire, because when I ran for Congress in 2006, I met the mother of a Plymouth State student who had been diagnosed with cancer when she was a senior. And Michelle went to her insurance company and said, my doctors have said that I need to take a leave of absence in order to get treatment for cancer. And her insurance company said, basically, you can get a leave of absence, but if you do, you're no longer going to be on your parents' insurance. We're going to cut you off because you're no longer going to be part of that exception which says if you're a full-time student, you'll have insurance.
Yeah.
So she was forced, essentially, to stay in school, receive her treatments. She managed to graduate, and unfortunately, she died. Her mom took up the fight and got a law passed in New Hampshire called Michelle's Law. And one of the first things I did was I took it to Congress, worked in a bipartisan way, and got it passed and signed as federal law that students could take leaves of absence for medical reasons and stay on their parents' insurance. And that became the basis for the provision in the Affordable Care Act that said kids up to age 26 could stay on their parents' policies.
Really? Well, congratulations. I did not know about that
It was a
achievement.
piece of work that I'm very proud of.
And I think you definitely should be, because
Yeah.
that is one of the things that people most like about the Affordable Care Act. After feeling it was not such a good idea in 2010 and hurting a lot of very capable candidates like yourself, here we've come to the current administration with Republican control, both houses of Congress and the White House, and after the House voted, I think, like 63 times to repeal it, when it didn't count because there was a veto there. After that, when they get the power, they can't repeal it.
Right.
Although they're trying to kill it by 1,000 cuts, aren't
That's
they?
it. That's
Including
the
in the
idea.
new tax bill.
I know. Yeah.
You know, you mentioned the individual mandate, and I don't know if everybody out there understands this. There's been a lot about it, but why don't you, Paul, just tell it why that is so critical as a component of the Affordable Care Act?
Well, first of all, one of the interesting points that people may not know is the Affordable Care Act started as a essentially conservative Republican plan
Out of the Heritage
developed
Foundation.
by the Heritage Foundation, which is a far-right think tank, and they developed it, and it was put in place in Massachusetts, essentially, by Mitt Romney,
Romney Care.
a Republican. So this plan was not some kind of liberal fantasy. It was frankly a conservative plan because it kept the private insurance market in place, but for the first time, it controlled the private insurance market. And the importance of requiring people to have insurance was that in order to try to keep prices down, you had to say to people, well, the insurance companies are going to get all these new people. And that is, all those new people coming in are going to incentivize the insurance companies to keep prices down. So you had to have a real incentive for people to go and buy insurance. Otherwise, if they simply say, no, we're not buying insurance, the scheme, which was make a lot of people sign up for health insurance, so this insurance companies have all these new people, and because they're making money on a lot of people, they'll keep the premiums down for others.
Right.
That scheme is weakened. And so that's why
Yeah.
the president at the time, Obama, actually flipped, because during the campaign, he had said, I'm for a voluntary system. When he realized how the numbers worked, he said, we got to have
really?
the mandatory system.
And certainly that seems to be absolutely critical. We have an aging population, particularly in New Hampshire, the silver tsunami, as they call it. And
I'm a part of that silver
So-
tsunami.
so am I.
I mean, take a look.
Take a
Right?
look indeed.
Yeah.
And we have to have young people who don't think they're, because they're young and they think they'll live forever and they'll never get sick. But they will, because this is the insurance everybody is going to use. Everybody's going to use this. You may skate through life without an auto accident needing auto insurance. Unlikely, but you could. but you're not going to skate through life without needing to access the health care.
You know, I have to tell you this. Look, a lot of people liken health insurance to auto insurance. They say it ought to work the same way. Health insurance is different.
Very different.
I think that in order to have a productive workforce, in order to have a thriving economy, health care should be considered a right.
Yeah.
There's a lot of disagreement about that, but I think health care is a right. It comes in the Declaration of Independence, the life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness.
Yeah.
If you're going to pursue happiness, you're going to have your liberty. The government needs to think about the life of its citizens. So I've actually moved on health care at this point, and I think that we need either a strong public option in the Affordable Care Act
Yep.
and a robust working Affordable Care Act, which the parties come together on in a bipartisan effort, putting country first to make it work for everybody, or we're going to have to move to the only practical system that's going to make it affordable and accessible and portable in a new economy, which is essentially Medicare for all.
Yeah.
And that's just the way it's got to go. It makes sense. If you take the politics out of it and you think about what it does for the country, it means people now in a portable job economy no longer have to worry about their health care.
Yeah.
And we just got to figure out how to make the health care system work.
Yeah. And it's always interesting to me. I just got back from the UK because my son lives there, and I have to go over there and see my grandson. It's a long
Good for
trip.
you. Good for you. It's a good place to go.
I tried desperately to get him to consider coming back here, but it's not going to happen real soon. But, you know, in the UK and Canada and any number of other nations you can mention around us, it doesn't matter whether the Conservatives are in power or the Liberals are in power. In the case of Britain, it would be Labour versus the Conservatives. Nobody ever suggests that we do away with the national health care programs in these countries. Nobody. I don't care how conservative you are, it doesn't happen. So why does it happen in this country that the conservatives all think that this is a socialist boondoggle?
Let's be straight about this. The politics are that if you call something a name and repeat it often enough,
Yeah.
that people don't get past the headline. So if you
Yeah.
call something socialist and it's evil, kind of an old-fashioned, Soviet-era kind of argument, people don't
Soviet
get...
era, go back to Goebbels and the Nazi regime.
Well,
the big lie.
That's
Just
right. People
a
don't
little
get
grain
past
of
it.
truth, but not much, and you just repeat it and repeat
Right.
it and repeat it, and people buy it.
That's right. So, I mean, look, anything that we do will have to be a uniquely American solution. But if we're really being honest, we ought to take the politics out of it. People ought to come together, stop all this stupid partisan approach, because right now, the Trump administration, it's just trying to undo anything Obama did for the sake of undoing what
Yeah.
Obama did.
Yeah, I think
and we ought to
that's true.
come together as a country and make this healthcare system work for everybody.
Yeah. Well, we usually take a couple of breaks here, folks, and we're going to take one right now. But I hope you'll call in and join us. We are very pleased to have former Congressman and person of many accomplishments, Paul Hodes, with us for the first time in the history of the Progress Report. And we'll be right back. I expect that before we get to the next break, we may have Lou D'Alessandro joining us. At least that was his hope. So please call us at 640-3091 if you want to participate. And we'll be right back. So this is the December 13th Wednesday progress report. We've been doing this, believe it or not, folks, for I believe 8 years plus. And tonight we're very pleased for the first time to welcome our former congressman from the 2nd District and one-time U.S. senatorial candidate and very talented and capable person, Paul Hodes, to join us from Concord. And we've been having an interesting discussion about the fate of the Affordable Care Act, which looks like it was doomed, but it's managed to survive because what do you know? It turns out a lot of people like having health care that they can't take away because of pre-existing conditions, and they like being able to have their children be on a health care program through age 26. And it turns out that despite the many efforts by the Republicans to kill this by many, many votes, it survives and may even survive yet, although the attacks are not ending. Paul, I wanted to talk about a couple of other things you've been involved in. I know you have a radio show of your own up in Concord on WKXL.
I do. It's WKXL AM and FM.
And when do you get that?
Well, it airs Friday at 3, Saturday at 11, Sunday at noon. We generally put the show together on Friday, and it repeats.
That's a good thing.
Hour-long show, not a call-in, but I get to rant usually in the first episode. As I say, rant globally, love locally. And then I have a guest for half an hour, and it's a wide range of sometimes offbeat, sometimes musical, sometimes theatrical, sometimes business, politics, law, culture, lifestyle, you name it.
Yeah, one of the things about Paul, and especially his lovely wife, Pego, is that they offer not only great insight and analysis into our political issues, but they offer art and music especially, and both very talented. You also were telling me before we went on about a new thing you're doing, an online thing called Democracy Still in Denial?
Yeah.
Tell us about that.
Well, I've got a good friend of mine who's a political strategist and commentator who served in a number of presidential administrations. He and I have put together an article called Democrats Still in Denial, talking about the challenges at the national level for the Democratic Party after the 2016 election in rebooting, reorganizing, and finding a concise agenda that communicates and an emotionally resonant message that really says to people, Democrats are listening, Democrats care about working people, and Democrats can govern in a way that makes life better for you. And we expect the article to be published online either this weekend or Monday morning. And as of now, I'm scheduled to be on MSNBC on Monday morning, but that's always we'll see
Subject
if
to
we'll see if it happens.
Yeah.
But
I hope it does.
But right now, Monday morning, sometime in the 6 to 9 slot, it looks like right now I'll be on MSNBC talking about some of these issues for the National Democratic Party.
Well, I hope that does in fact happen as currently scheduled. And that makes me want to ask you about, we're going to smile about this, the election results yesterday in Alabama.
Well, that brings a smile to my face and a tear of joy to my eye. I stayed up all night, not all night, but pretty late, waiting for 99% of the vote in Alabama to come in. Yeah. Doug Jones, the Democratic candidate, of course, won by a pretty slim margin, but he still won, despite the fact that his opponent, Judge Roy Moore, who campaigned in costume, I think, refused to concede.
Rode to the polls on a horse.
He rode to the polls on a horse and rode away from the polls on a horse and got ridden out of town on a horse. So for Democrats, it was a real glimmer, I think, of hope. A bellwether, a potentially historic vote. First time in 25 years a Democrat was elected in Alabama, a deep, deep red southern state.
Yeah, this was not supposed to happen.
Well, it was always going to be a tough one. It was an uphill battle for Jones. He had to get everything right and Moore, who, let's face it, was, I can't imagine a worse candidate for the Republicans, and that's why a lot of Republicans abandoned him.
Yeah, a lot
I
of
can't
write-in
imagine
votes,
a worse candidate for the Republicans. Here you had a guy, a judge, who was thrown off the state Supreme Court twice, who made terrible remarks just before the election about saying that the time of slavery was a great time for unity in the country,
Right.
who was credibly accused of pedophilia, molesting children. Okay, he was credibly accused of being in his 30s and molesting a 14-year-old girl. It caused many establishment Republicans, not the Bannon Republicans, but the establishment Republicans, to abandon him. And in fact, the day before the election, Richard Shelby, senator from Alabama, who once was a Democrat, became a Republican, elected as a Democrat, became a Republican, went on the air in a CNN interview with Jake Tapper, and basically said to his fellow Alabamians, don't vote for Roy Moore. If you can't vote for the Democrat, which Shelby said he wasn't going to do, write in a Republican. And so what you had in this election was a huge number of write-in votes.
Enough to have swung the election, apparently.
Apparently, about 22,000, about the same margin of victory.
Yeah.
And you also had much higher than usual turnout with the African-American community. So that turnout, which usually in Alabama in midterms was between 32 and 35%, was 40%. Much of that was due to intense organizing efforts in the African-American community, and brought out the vote. There was a lot of energy there, which is really important. And women abandoned Roy Moore in significant numbers, and that had
Not
a lot to do with it. Not surprising. I mean, look, you have a child molester running for the Senate, the president, who's been credibly accused of assaulting numbers of women, who went on the famous Hollywood Access tape and said all those terrible things about what you could do,
And then
came out
at
and
least 12 women said that he wasn't just talking, he did it.
yeah, and so I mean that's the president of the United States.
Yeah.
That's a whole other subject. But he came in strong for Moore, and clearly that didn't help Moore.
Yeah, yeah. It's just a stunning result, and I want to shout out to some members of our delegation in the House in Concord, led by our minority leader Steve Shurtleff. They went down to Alabama.
Right.
Steve Shurtleff, his deputy Cindy Rosenwald from Nashua, Beth Rod from Bradford, and I'm going to leave some out here, Eileen Kelly, the senior staffer. They all went down there. There was about a half a dozen, and they were going door to door in some of the black neighborhoods in Alabama, urging people to get out and vote, and who knows, that probably helped.
Well, the Doug Jones campaign said they knocked on 1.2 million doors. So I mean, they did a lot of door knocking.
Yeah.
The Doug Jones campaign ended up running a good campaign.
Which is interesting because of my understanding, and I get this from a Times article, New York Times article I read, the Democrats had practically no infrastructure, existing there before this campaign. It all had to be created as part of the campaign.
Well, it's one of the problems for the National Democratic Party.
Yeah.
Is that in a lot of states, not in New Hampshire, where we have very strong infrastructure
We
and
do.
a very strong state party led by Ray Buckley, but nationally, after Howard Dean left as chair of the DNC, the states around the country have really been struggling to get any support for state Democratic efforts.
Yeah,
It's a real it's a problem that has to be corrected.
yeah. So let's turn to some other things here locally, Paul, if you're able to do this, which I'm sure you are. We were talking a little bit before we came in about the shape of things as we look toward next year, which is going to be an election, and we'll be electing all statewide offices except a U.S. Senator, I guess, next year, because under the Constitution they have 6-year terms. For everybody else, our 2 congressmen, our governor, all members of the Senate, all members of the House will be up for election next year.
It's a state sport. Come on,
It's
Bob.
a state sport.
It's the state sport.
We have
every
more,
2 years.
We have more elections than anybody else.
That's
and,
right. And we're proud. And we're proud about
And
it.
we're proud about
That's
it. And
it.
despite what some say, we think that the elections are basically not fraudulent. They're basically honest elections.
They are, by the way, not fraudulent. They are honest elections. We run New Hampshire folks run very, very good elections with real integrity.
Yeah. So we have an open seat coming up in the 1st District, which is not where you would be able to run because you live in Concord, which is in the 2nd District. But, it looks like it's going to be a very interesting situation there.
So
tell us about that.
I'll start my answer with this factoid. As it happens, under the United States Constitution and election law, I could run in the 1st District.
You could?
That's right, because when you live in anywhere in the state, you can run for Congress.
No kidding.
No kidding.
I did not know that.
It's true. I'm not running in the 1st District, but I could. Now, New Hampshire, we really care about our local communities. I don't think anybody in the 1st District would be particularly happy if somebody from another district ran in their district without living there, because they want to make sure that the person who represents them really lives in the district and represents
sort
them.
of the first test we had of a special congressional election after the Obama, don't I wish, the Trump inauguration was that district down in near Atlanta, Georgia, where there was a guy named John Ossoff that ran a very strong campaign, but he didn't live in the district.
Right. Yeah.
So that's an example, I guess.
Yeah, the 1st District is interesting. I mean, the 1st District, of which Manchester is a major part, biggest population center in the 1st District, has flipped back and forth. Carol Shea Porter, Frank Ginta, Carol Shea Porter, Frank Ginta, Carol Shea Porter, who announced her retirement. On the Democratic side, there's a very strong field of, I think, about 7 people.
Yes.
All of whom are really credible and strong candidates. So it's going to be probably one of the most closely watched races nationally. I think Democrats have a really good chance. Of course, from Manchester, Chris Pappas is running. Chris, who is the
very highly regarded,
proprietor of the
serving executive counselor.
That's right.
Before that, a Hillsborough County treasurer.
He runs the Backroom Restaurant.
Everybody loves that.
Everybody loves the Backroom, the best chicken fingers in the United States of America. I've eaten a lot of those chicken fingers.
So
let's face it.
Hard to miss them.
You don't get this way without eating a lot of Chris's chicken fingers. But people know him to be a businessman of integrity and honesty, a really hardworking public servant. And there are a number of other candidates who have really impressive backgrounds. But nationally, because it's a swing district, there's going to be a lot of attention focused on that race.
Yeah. What about the 2nd District? Do you think Annie Custer has any trouble getting back in office there?
Well, it's interesting. Annie has now served historically for 3 terms, I think, and she may end up with some strong competition. There's some chatter that Josh McKelvey, who was a journalist and a TV personality on MUR, is thinking about getting in the race. He would certainly be a high-profile name in the race, but the 2nd District has been, except for some minor aberrations, pretty reliably Democratic.
Much more so than the 1st.
Much more so than the 1st. So I think Annie is a prodigious fundraiser and a good campaigner, and I think she will hold on to that seat.
Good. Paul, let's turn to some of the critical issues that we're facing in New Hampshire. The number one thing that comes to mind, I think, for a lot of people is our unfortunately very high ranking in terms of opioid deaths here in the state. Led President Trump at one point to call New Hampshire a drug-infested den, which I thought was a little over the top, but still, the truth is we have a really, really serious problem here. What do you think is making New Hampshire be such a place where this is such a crisis as compared to some other states, and what do you think we need to do about it?
It's a national disaster, first of all. Look, I think that, let me first give you a big picture answer, and then I'll get in a little closer. In the big picture, there are 2 symptoms of a kind of sense that we've had of national fear and despair. The opioid crisis and the election of Donald Trump are the two symptoms. And they are, in the big picture, as I say, symptoms, I think, of an underlying sense of fear and anxiety in the country. Where are we going? Who do we care for? Or how do we care for our people? And what are we going to do to answer certain really difficult issues? In New Hampshire, for example, the funding and accessibility of mental health services is not good enough. We need to address that in a big way. We used to be in the forefront of providing mental health services in the country. We were a pioneer back in the late 70s.
When we deinstitutionalized and
That's right.
took the vast numbers, I guess,
And
1,000 or more out of the old
And
state
now
hospital.
it's not now we've fallen way behind.
Yeah.
Problems at the New Hampshire State Hospital system, they show that. The funding for mental health services is not on a parity with physical health. People don't get that connection. Substance abuse disorders and opioid addiction, probably we ought to look at decriminalizing in a way so that instead of treating people as criminals who are addicts, we treat them as patients who need care. In countries like some of the Scandinavian countries where they've decriminalized addiction, essentially, what you get is a care system that really helps to reduce the level of opioid addiction. There are good programs being done. For example, the Manchester Fire Department's program of kind of setting up their firehouses as safe stations is a great program. But we need more and better mental health treatment. We need to take a new approach to opioid addiction, and it's both at the state level and also at the federal level. President Trump can call us names, he can make campaign promises, but it really is going to require significant federal resources for health care. The law enforcement efforts in terms of stopping the flow of drugs need to happen both at the federal and state level, because a lot of the fentanyl that is so deadly that's coming into this country is coming in, it starts in China where it's manufactured. It's probably coming in over our borders, and we have numbers of borders that it's coming in on, but it starts with China. And so the federal government has to do a lot more about stopping it at its source and making sure that it's being interdicted. We need a lot of education, a lot of care, and a new approach to opioids in the state. And so far, unfortunately, I haven't seen it.
Yeah. There was an interesting press conference up in Concord today at the LOB with all the Democratic senators were there, and they were calling upon taking a certain amount of money, I think it was like 10, 12 million out of the rainy day fund, and putting it toward addressing the opioid crisis. And it seems to me like they were right. I mean, if our opioid crisis isn't a rainy storm, it's probably it's worse than a rain. It's a hurricane. I mean, why would we not do this? Why would we not do this? But
look, what you think about is people who are the ripple effect of substance abuse and opioid addiction. Right. Is terrible. Yeah. The impact on families, on jobs, on productivity. And we've also got to take a really close look at the role of Big Pharma in pushing opioids. Clearly, they wanted to make a profit, and they pushed opioids as safe and non-addictive. Yeah. Doctors have been prescribing opioids. We're a nation that's addicted to taking pills for problems, and the medical community really has to and is beginning, I think, to take a really close look at their role in prescribing opioids. The challenge is there are people who need pain relief. And
right, you got to thread that needle,
and you don't want to deny people who need the pain relief.
You got to have palliative care.
That's right, but we've got to really take a close look and hold accountable. I think hold Big Pharma accountable for their role in lying to the public about the effect and the addictive qualities of opioids.
Right. So I think we'll take our second and last break on this edition of the Progress Report for December 13th, and we will take a very short break, and we'll be right back. And once again, I invite anybody who would like to participate to call in at 640-3091. We'd love to hear from you if you are available. And we'll be right back. Hey everybody, this is the final segment, as it usually is, in our progress report for this Wednesday, December 13th. And if you've been joining us, you know that I'm really, really pleased that for the first time in the long history of this show, we have on our former congressman and artist musician Paul Hodes to join us, and we've been talking about a whole number of issues. We ended up kind of discussing one of the more troubling issues for our state, and that's the opioid crisis, where you're losing too many people too fast to this deadly scourge, and what needs to be done about that. But there's another issue that's front and center for New Hampshire right now, and that's, we have an aging population, the silver tsunami they call it. I believe most statistics show that we are probably the second most aged population state in the nation, next to maybe Maine, or maybe it's Vermont, I don't know. But we're up there where we don't necessarily want to be, and we want to attract a workforce that our industries need. New Hampshire's a very high-tech state. We're an exporting state, and we hear again and again that the number one problem that our industries that deal in these important fields face is finding the workforce they need to create the products they need to do the business that they need to do to keep our economy booming, which it certainly seems to be. And Paul, you've told me you've got something going on this too.
Yeah, I went to a forum on the future this morning, actually, in Bedford, hosted by the New Hampshire Council of Universities and Colleges.
Oh, yes.
And the discussion was about a program, an effort, a dialogue called 65 by 25. And the theme was that we've got a knowledge economy now. And in order to create the workforce we need to have to attract businesses to New Hampshire and provide the workers that new businesses and existing businesses in the state need, we need to raise significantly the number of our citizens who are graduating from post-secondary education. It's probably under 50% now, and the effort is to raise it to something like 65% of New Hampshire citizens by the year 2025. And the workforce has changed. Business has changed. The needs of businesses have changed. And if you think about what it takes now to work in a flexible job environment, a knowledge economy, what you learn and what the statistics tell us about the earning power of people who graduate from a college as opposed to a high school diploma are pretty staggering. Somebody who graduates from a college can expect to earn $1 million more in their lifetime than a person who just graduates from high school. And because of the nature of the changes of the workforce and the challenges, artificial intelligence, robots, portable jobs, STEM needs, technology. You need an educated workforce to attract businesses.
A place where that really hits is right here in Manchester, where the latest Dean Kamen, also associated with UNH Manchester project, called ARMI, which is not the military service. It's the Advanced Regenerative Manufacturing Institute to help our veterans and many others, to have regenerative parts.
It's an extraordinary example. I mean, Manchester's really leading the state in high tech, and the rest of the state really is going to need to catch up, and we need to keep our college students here. Right now, less than half of kids who go to college stay here. Most people leave. Ultimately, the real New Hampshire advantage is going to be in the strength of our education system, the way we deal with innovation in business, and how we invest in our infrastructure. And that means an education system that isn't just adequate but excellent. It means supporting innovation at every level and the skilled workforce to support innovative businesses, and investment in the infrastructure of the future. You can't run a state like ours without broadband everywhere, let alone good highways. But you're going to have the highways of the future.
We want the train.
I have a story about that.
Okay.
The train story is that the one thing I asked President Obama for, I got a ride on Air Force One from Washington to New Hampshire for an event. We got a chance to sit with the president. And at the time, the state had blown their application for money to study the rail system.
Right.
It had been rejected. And I said...
I think it was done in our New Hampshire house.
Well, that's right. And I said, Mr. President,
Very sad.
The one thing I would like is, can we figure out how to re-up that application? Because I think we need to study rail in New Hampshire. High-speed rail is going to be really important. And within a couple of days, he had the transportation secretary in my office, along with Mayor Donnelly Lozo, then of Nashua. And sure enough, we got the chance to reapply for study funds. Unfortunately, the legislature, in its wisdom, hasn't gone along. But that's an example of technology, which is old technology, applied in a new circumstance, where if we could connect the southern part of our state, let's just say all the way up to Concord, with Boston, a big high-tech hub, so that people could live here and commute back and forth, we'd take...
Or people can come here to take the jobs that we are going to be offering at Army and all our other high-tech
plus,
businesses.
it would take cars off the road. The gridlock that you see at rush hour would be diminished. But the other thing, the point I raised this morning at this meeting was that I heard a lot about STEM, which is really important. What I didn't hear was about STEAM, which is including arts and culture as an essential part of an education. And because it's arts and culture that teach creativity, teamwork, and flexible thinking.
Exactly. And I think of a lot of individuals I know who've been art students who've been very successful in non-arts areas. Like my daughter-in-law is a, entrepreneur
Everybody-
in Chicago.
Everybody has that story. I had a conversation this morning with our education commissioner, Frank Edelblut. He reminded me that I had appointed him when I was a congressman to a small business commission, and he told me about his extraordinarily bright and talented son who wanted to go to art school,
Yeah.
and took his artistic ability and is now on the Google development team for virtual reality, using his artistic ability
Yeah.
to develop the technologies of the future that are going to excite so many people, and big business. So it's that marriage of creativity and technology which really is the future. I serve on the National Council on the Arts, which oversees the National Endowment, and as you pointed
So
out,
you're part of the Trump administration.
so I'm now a proud member of two administrations. I was appointed by President Obama, had a 1-year vetting by the FBI, confirmed by a Senate vote, and I'm now serving in the Trump administration, proudly, burnishing my bipartisan credentials, showing that it's possible for even a guy like me
How about
to
that?
continue to serve the country.
Paul, it's been great to have you here. We're just about to the end of our show, which always go by so fast. Sorry Lou didn't make it. He's a busy guy, I know, but we'll be back with another edition of the Progress Report next week, and I hope Mike Farley will join us. I just want to end with one thing. We're talking about rail, which is a real passion of mine, and obviously yours, Paul. I just was in the UK, and we had a trip up to the Lakes District with my son and his family. And the trains have an announcement posted. If we're so many minutes late, you get half your funds back. If you're more than that late, you get your entire refund back. No, the trains kind of run on time.
It's great to be in a country where the trains run on time, and let's hope.
It doesn't have to be Mussolini that does it.
Let's hope that here in the United States we can get all the trains to run on time and policies that help all of us.
Yeah.
Because a rising tide takes everybody with it.
Yeah, that's true. And Paul, I don't know whether you think your political career is over, but I hope it is not. I hope you still look into the opportunities, because I think you have been an outstanding servant to the public and
thank you,
continue to
Bob.
be. And
As of you.
well, thank you very much. But I really appreciate your service, and I know it will continue, and you'll continue to favor us with some wonderful music with your lovely wife, Pego.
We'll come back and play
And
on the station.
I want to have some music. I really would like to have had some music for this show.
We'll come
but
back and play for
We
you.
really want to do that, because
Okay.
it's really outstanding.
It's a deal.
Okay, that's it, folks. We'll be back next week with another edition of the Progress Report. At that time, I trust Mike Farley will be back with me, and we look forward to seeing you. And everybody have a great week. See you next time. Bye.